Hey friends, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this up front. Today's episode might make some of y'all uncomfortable, and honestly, that's the point. We're gonna be talking about racial preferences, the ones we claim are just a preference, and even though we know that a lot of them are rooted in anti-Blackness, white worship, and centuries of stereotypes. We're talking about fetishization, when Black and brown bodies are reduced to fantasies, kinks, and categories. We're talking about the bias that hides in our dating apps, our porn history, or even our friend groups and ourselves. Now, let's start with a little perspective because I want to get this in front of people just so they get where the perspective's coming from. I used a mix of census data and AI to get some numbers. When we look at LGBTQ plus men across the U.S., the racial breakdown is approximately 58% white, 19% Latino Hispanic, 13% Black, 5% Asian, 4% multiracial or other. I don't like other. Just that term just sounds weird. And 1% Native American. That's for the U.S. for LGBTQ plus men across the board. Now, zoom into California. That's where I'm from. That's where I currently live. One of the most, if not the most, racially diverse state in the country, and the numbers shift. So for California, it's 39% Latino Hispanic, 38% white, which is like 77, 78% of the total LGBTQ male population in the state. And then we have 11% Black, 7% Asian, 4% multiracial or other, and 1% Native American. And that's not just a stat, that is a reality. It means when Black queer men say we feel invisible, excluded, or overlooked in dating spaces, we're not being dramatic. That's the math. And meanwhile, white LGBTQ men continue to dominate dating culture, the media, the representation, the type list, and unspoken standards of desirability. So we got to ask, if we're in a place as racially rich as California, and white still gets treated like the default, what does that tell you? These aren't just personal preferences, these are patterns. These are power dynamics. These are learned behaviors shaped by media, by history, by proximity to whiteness. And here's the thing. We're not reading from a textbook of historical knowledge. This isn't an essay. This is not some educational university dissertation. We're speaking from personal lived experiences. This is our truth. So before anyone comes in trying to fact check feelings, questions, perspectives, or police Blackness, don't. You don't have to agree with every word, but you will respect that this is real for us. This is conversation that is needed. And this conversation is not about guilt, it's about truth. So if you've ever heard someone say, I'm just not into Black guys, or I don't date outside my race, or I've always had a thing for Latino men, I want you to lean in, not defensively, but curiously. Because desire isn't neutral. If we don't interrogate who we've been taught to love and who we've been taught to leave out, we'll keep repeating the same pattern, the same harm in the name of preference. So take a deep breath, unclench your jaw, and let's get into it.
Hey, Black, queer, unapologetic. Black, queer, unapologetic. I know who I am, now you know what I'm about. I say the thoughts in my head out loud. Let's get into it, let's pick up the flow though. Brought to you by the one they call JoJo. Black,
Hey, Joseph.
Hey, hello, Jojo.
How are you?
I'm good. I've had a pretty chill day today. Ready to talk about some stuff.
Yeah, I was excited for you to volunteer yourself for this one because this is something that I wanted to talk about for a really long time.
Yeah, you told me that, and I was so surprised that people didn't want to talk about that because maybe they're afraid of stepping on a landmine. But I feel as though, specifically in Sacramento, it's a very interesting landscape of racial preferences and that discussion. And I think it's hilarious. So that's why I'm surprised that people didn't want to talk about it. I'm like, it's funny as fuck.
Yeah, I've lived a couple of different places and I've seen the mix up of how things go, but give the people a little intro of who you are just so they know who they're listening to.
Okay, I'm Joseph. My pronouns are he, him. I am 54.5% Irish, 39.9% Black, and the rest is a bunch of different stuff. I'm a Cancer, and my astrological sign is Scorpio.
She likes long walks on the beach.
I'm a menace. I'm a disaster.
I can attest to that.
I grew up in Sacramento. I went off to the East Coast for college and came right back to this interesting city.
What was it like growing up in Sacramento?
It was chill. I feel like Sacramento is one of those places where it's super different depending on where you live. When people say they're from Sacramento, it's a really large swath of land, right? I grew up in South Sac, which honestly is very POC. It's very Black, very Hispanic. I probably didn't fit in as much because I was a little too white.
What does that mean?
I had a lot of people that lived on the same street, lived around me, who were kind of like, Joe, you do things that are very Caucasian. Not something that I said, but something that they said. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So from feedback that I was given when I was growing up, I would say that's the case. I really enjoyed my childhood. It was a really great place to grow up. I think because of how Sacramento's laid out, as long as you're given that kind of independence from your parents and you have that understanding and trust, you can do a lot of things really easily without spending a lot of money and get to a lot of places without spending a lot of time. So it was really nice. At one point when I was in high school, I was biking. I went to high school at Arthur A. Benjamin Health Professions High School, right off of Broadway and 5th. I was the second graduating class. Would bike down Riverside 45 minutes, go to school, finish the day, and just do whatever I wanted. You know, I'd like bike around downtown, or I'd go like get a coffee with a friend or chill and then go home. So there's just a lot of independence that you can have here, I feel, growing up, which is nice, I think. Definitely helps me like be prepared for the adult world. So, yeah.
Okay. And then I always ask, like, is just California people, because people from other places outside of California, it doesn't matter whether it's a different country or different state or just like West Coast, the coming out experience can be very different. Like if you live in the South,
my coming out experience was fairly benign. My mom is super like, love everybody, no matter who they are, but like legitimately, like she's an extreme extrovert who's just like, a stranger on the street is just a friend I haven't met yet. It was terrifying. I love her very much. When I was 12, it was on a car ride to school. I was like, hey, Mom, I think I like guys. She's like, okay, that's cool. Oh, that was basically it. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Probably my most dramatic coming out was my junior year of high school. It was the last week of school. I came out to the entire school out of spite. It was a small school, and basically something happens first period, everyone knows it by third. I came out to more than just my close friends, and then everyone knew. So it was out of spite. It was not my proudest moment as being an asshole. I was an asshole back, and part of the monologue of me being an asshole back was saying that I was gay, and yeah, but it's a fun story for another time. But yeah.
Uh-huh. And then the whole biracial situation as far as dating goes when you were younger. And I know you mentioned you moved when you went to college, but locally, how was that?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was still in high school, I dated two people. One guy I dated for a really short time, like 3 weeks. The other person I dated between graduating high school and me going off to college,
Okay.
he was going to his junior year of high school. I was going to college, except he was an older junior and I was a younger high school graduate. So I was going to be 17 2 months into college and he was already 16. So it wasn't creepy. Yeah, we dated over that summer. He is a darker skinned Asian guy. We were like, well, this has run its course and I enjoyed this. And he was like, yeah, I enjoyed this too. And that was kind of it. I didn't really date though. Like I didn't really like go on dates with people in high school other than when I ended up like dating those people. I didn't really go out of my way to try and date people.
What about hook up with people?
I didn't either. Actually, I didn't like I didn't hook up with somebody until I was like junior year of college. Like it was like my third year of college. I didn't have penetrative sex, like anal penetrative sex, until I graduated college when I was 22. So it was probably when I was 24. Yeah, that was my first experience with that. I was a really late bloomer just because I generally don't like people. So if I'm like, and then we're going to spend time having sex, I better enjoy your company. So it's a bit of a big hurdle to get over.
And I mean, but I do also feel like I don't know you that well now because I'm just like, damn, this is that Joseph that you're describing.
Yeah, you very
not
different.
the same Joseph
I've
that I
lived
know.
a life. I'm 32. I'm old now. I've had a life. There are high schoolers that I've mentored. I'm an adult.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you were in your goody two shoes days.
It wasn't that I was in my goody two shoes days. I've always had a very direct outlook on life. I mean, my mom said that I've pretty much had the same way of dealing with the world as I did when I was like 4. It's like I'm just very like matter of fact. I'm a very pragmatic person. I weigh the pros and cons, and if it doesn't seem like I would enjoy it, I won't do it. Yeah. So like I didn't drink in high school, not because I didn't want to drink in high school. I literally was just like, my closest friends aren't really drinking, or when they do drink, they're kind of like, this wasn't really fun. And it seems like there's a lot of work into trying to get alcohol when you're young. So
that was a process.
Yeah, so I was like, this just seems like not worth it. Like I'm gonna wait until bare minimum, like the access to alcohol is easier to maybe lessen the cons of trying to do this. Mm-hmm. I did try smoking when I was in high school, and I was like, this is okay.
Like what?
Just a cigarette?
Okay.
Cigarettes. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I went to a bad.
You don't know?
I went to a high school where people were doing all kinds of shit.
Are you asking if I did a weed?
Yeah.
I didn't smoke weed until I was in college, and even then, I would just get drunk with friends instead.
Joseph, I'm really getting to know you more.
Yeah. Before graduating college, the things I did were very goody two shoes, but not like the things I did were very stereotypically goody two shoes, but they were not like I wasn't doing it to be a goody two shoes. I wasn't doing it to be like, well, if you guys are drinking, I'm a good person, because I'm not. Like that wasn't the reason. I literally was like, okay, like that's fine. I'm cool. I just don't feel like it. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I know what I know about you and I'm getting to know more, but I think in the context of the episode, we're going to be talking about racial preferences. And I think that you might have a unique perspective on it because you are biracial and people might treat you differently than they treat me. And so I kind of want to get to the bottom of that. We're going to really just get into the nitty gritty of like, what the fuck is going on in these people's heads. But what's been your experience dating as a biracial man in the gay community?
I get the whole gambit, right? I've had people who ascribe the stereotypes that are typically ascribed to Black men, right? Where they're like, oh yeah, you're gonna be a dom top daddy and blah blah blah, and with my beard too. So they're like, oh. And then I've had white people essentially say everything but the words, oh, you're like a safe Black
Oh,
person.
hell no.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've
No.
gotten crazy fucking messages on apps, the whole shebang. In terms of dating specifically, one thing that I have noticed, and I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different variables, a lot of different factors that go into somebody's decision on whether or not they think of someone as dateable or even want to date them, right? But I've noticed just in general that a lot of people have difficulty placing me into a very easy, definable, like, oh, this is what you like and this is what you're into. And that has made them not interested in approaching, or rather, I've been told that because of that, I seem very intimidating and I'm not approachable. I think in general, in the world, ascribing a set of characteristics or an archetype or a story for somebody is kind of how our minds work, right? That's how the human mind works, right? That's how society ends up working a lot of the time. I don't do that with people unless they fucking act like fucking caricature. And I'm very clear that I don't do that with people because I'm outspoken about stuff like that, and because I look the way I look, and I'm kind of a mix of stuff, both physically and mentally. I think that intimidates a lot of people, and they're not really interested in like broaching me or that. They're kind of like, dating you seems like it would be work, and not the type of work that like, not the type of work of like, oh, you're height maintenance, but more the type of work of like, fuck, I'm gonna have to evaluate myself and how I go about myself in the world, how I go about living life in the world. Not like an easy springboard, which I think is difficult for people.
Yeah, you bring up people thinking that it's going to be work. I know that there are people who maybe are not Black, and I feel like there are people that are not Black who overly sexualize Black men.
Oh yeah.
Anyone that is a lot more melanated than somebody else. They don't even need to be Black. It's something about darker skin and a bigger body type that automatically puts you in a category of dom. There's this particular guy who is not Black, and he said that he could not date a Black person because his family would not be okay with it.
Oh.
And recently, though, so he told me this probably like 2018.
Is this someone you were friends with or trying to fuck?
No, I was fucking him.
Yeah, but he was like, he was like, I really like you, but that's fucked. I really like you, but my family's 6th generation farmers.
Ridiculous. No, okay. No, I'm gonna be like super blunt about it. This was an Asian guy. And yeah, and his family basically was not down with him dating a Black dude. Right after we finished having sex, and we had hooked up multiple times, he was dating some Asian dude and it didn't work out. And he was talking, and I considered him a friend. Even when I hook up with people, I humanize them. I don't treat them like pieces of meat, like fucking getting out the door. Like, definitely we can, be cool or whatever. He was venting about stuff, and he let that come, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, so you're attracted to Black guys? And he's like, yes. And I was like, and you're attracted to white guys, Asian guys? Like, he didn't have any type of racial preference, but he had a dating preference that was racially skewed because of his parents, because they would not accept if he dated anyone that was other than Asian. But coincidentally, I actually saw him on social media the other day, and he has a Black boyfriend now. So yeah, so I'm like, oh, good for him.
Yes, question mark.
Let that shit go. I mean, I think it's wrong when people do it for their own stupid like reasons.
Well,
but I think it's the same thing with the family.
I was gonna say, bringing that up, so when I was younger, I would, and this is like a really stupid example, but it's something that I did when I was younger. When I was in high school, I predominantly listened to white artists. And,
music?
Okay. And it originated from, my sister was really into, and my sister's 7 years older than me. I would hang out with her, do whatever she was doing. She was really into grunge and alt rock and indie rock. And it grew out of a love of that. It evolved into me listening to Alanis Morissette and my sister being like, okay, angsty white girl music. When I went to college in my first couple of years, I made a point to predominantly listen to Black artists. Part of it was I was taken aback by the like sheer amount of whiteness at my college. My college, I think, had like a 2% Black population or something. It was like 90 something percent white. And yeah, I got there on a scholarship that paid for like 90% of it because I was doing math, I was doing science, and I was Black. And
She's smart.
yeah, well, the tuition was like 40 something thousand a year, and the majority of it was getting paid for me. I think there's something that happens specifically being biracial, not just Black and white, but in general. It's this thing where it's like culture and counterculture where you end up trying to do certain things or exhibit certain behaviors or make rules for yourself that are revolving around something. For example, revolving around my Blackness, right? And purposefully trying to make myself come off as less Black or more Black. And I think you don't really, because that's still like, it's still racial shit, right? It's still like being in this idea of like, this race has these things ascribed to it, and this is what being Black means, this is what being white means, this is what being Asian means. And I didn't really get out of that and really start enjoying and liking myself fully until I stopped ascribing things like music and my behaviors to whiteness or Blackness, and just been like, okay, what do I like about myself as a person? What kind of behaviors and things do I want to exhibit as a person with racial preferences and fetishizing people? It comes down to ascribing like, here's the bucket of what Black means. And so that's what this person is because they're Black. And it's like people are still playing checkers. You know what I mean? People are stuck in this like, either I need to exhibit these behaviors to be overtly Black, or I need to exhibit these behaviors to not seem as Black. And it's like, behaviors aren't Black. I'm sorry to tell you, like, a behavior is a behavior. You need to get out of that mindset. Like,
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
That's where it goes with like assumptions and like the fetish. It's like this, even with the fetishizations, like people assume that they're going to get something out of someone because they look a certain way. And that doesn't mean that you're going to get that. I feel like it's kind of dumb to assume that because every single person's built different, personality wise, emotionally, everything's different. I kind of get what you're saying because I have a cousin who talked about this. He's very hood, but also very fair skinned. And, you know, you get the whole thing about being too white for the Black people, but too Black for the white people. And that's gotta suck.
Yeah. I struggled with that a lot. I would say generally, I don't really struggle with that anymore, purely because I stopped. I realize it's one of those things where you're already losing if you're playing the game. Like, you're already putting yourself in a fucked up mindset if you're examining the way that you come off to people to make sure it's white enough or Black enough. Not just the narrative of, oh, I'm going to play the stereotypical Black man, but the fact that you're even reading from the scripts to look for your part is like, you're fucking yourself over, because the people who wrote that script are the people who want to put specific labels on what it means to be Black, what it means to be white, what it means to be Black and white in a sexual sense, for example, with racial preferences. That's the whole thing. I've learned to notice when people are in that mode, whether they're trying to be straight up assholes or whether they're trying to actually be good and be nice and stuff. I treat them the same, honestly. The fact that you're so in the narrative, whether you're trying to say, oh, you're Black, so you're going to be a dumb top, or you're trying to be like, oh, I'm not going to assume that you're top just because you're Black. Both of those things, like two different people saying two different things, both of those things to me are the same. Like, the fact that you even are taking that narrative into your calculation of whether or not you're interested in having sex with me is like, oh, I don't even want to deal with you. Like, you're still playing checkers. I can't deal with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're seeing the person not as a person. You're seeing them as how they compare to the stereotype that has been established. Whether you're seeing that in a positive or negative, whether you're seeing that stereotype in a positive or negative light, you're still holding it up, comparing that person and how they're kind of going about their life to that narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it from a Black perspective because this is obviously a Black queer unapologetic podcast. However, it does happen to other people too.
Oh yeah,
I've seen it happen with Asian people and being more like it's basically the opposite. Like I feel like Asian guys get a lot of the opposite of what we get as Black people, like being more submissive, being smaller, being bottoms, that kind of thing. Like Latinos get like this stereotype of being passionate, like being uncut and all that. I'm like, bitch, how you fuck? You just assume that he's uncut because he's Latino or some stupid shit.
Some stupid shit.
Yeah, stupid shit. Somebody made up a long time ago of what the stereotype is, and now that's the sexualized box somebody needs to fit into to be considered attractive.
Well, so
or unattractive.
We're gonna have a quick history lesson really quick.
The
whole idea of Black men are like dom top, daddy's gonna rail you, blah 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 blah, right? That comes from the idea of Black men being physically powerful and strong and having differences physicality wise than white men. And that narrative was used to justify the idea of having Black men as slaves because they had stronger physicalities and they could work the fields and do the farming lifting, and it wasn't as hard on them as frail white men with their different physicalities. It honestly, it's something that is very prevalent in the mainstream sexuality kind of culture, kind of zeitgeist, but it actually is a distilled attribute from a eugenicist perspective, from a really fucked up place. I mean, obviously that's history, but that's kind of where it's distilled from.
Yeah, well, let's talk about fetishization because I feel like the first time I experienced it, I am a man of a certain age, and so Grindr did not exist yet. However,
not the Craigslist. I'm too young for that. Too itty bitty baby for that. But I've heard it exists.
But you missed it by a couple years. But the first time, and we can get into more specifics of why this potentially happened. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was around, I think I was probably like 18 years old. Anyway, there were no apps on these phones. You had to figure out how to meet up with people. There wasn't a ton of 18 and up clubs. There were a couple, but they were like on the weekends and like,
yeah,
I'm trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing. I was also in a period of my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I joined the military at 19. I was in school, like phasing out of baseball, about to drop out of college. Basically, like I was just in a crisis.
Now I'm learning so much about you.
Yeah, that was a tragic moment. I found this guy on Craigslist. He was in Berkeley. I lived in Richmond. It's probably like a 15-minute drive if there's no traffic.
Yeah.
So I go over to the house, this white dude, hook up with him. It's good.
What age is he? Just out of curiosity.
He was a little bit older than me. I want to say he was like early to mid 20s. So I'm going to say somewhere between 22 to 26. Let's just say that. Yeah. So he's like 22 to 26. Hooked up with him. It was good. Got his contact information. Go hook up again. Okay. It's good.
Yeah.
Go about my business.
Nothing weird. Nothing
weird.
Okay.
Good sex. Like,
all right.
Nothing crazy happened.
Vibing.
Yeah. Then he's like, oh, I want to have a threesome. Back then, I didn't even know the rules of engagement with the hookups and things like that. I'm young.
Yeah.
I'm new to that. As far as pictures goes, I'm like, I'll just figure it out when I get there. At least I know the sex is good with him. He was the bottom. I was the top. I go over there. Now, this is supposed to be a threesome. I go over there, and there are 4 black dudes, me and 3 other guys.
Nope.
And, yes. And
already the math is not mathing. You said threesome. there are 5 people here.
Yes.
3 does not equal 5.
Yes.
I went to school for that shit. I know that's wrong.
That was the first thing I noticed. I'm like, there are too many people here. Then he was the only full bottom. And then 2 of the other guys were reversed. I wasn't bottoming at the time. I just hadn't grown into that part of myself yet. And then this one dude, I think he was just like a strict top, but the strict top dude was not cute. The other guys, the bottom dude, the 2 verse black guys, and they were cute. The top guy, not cute at all. I was like, damn, how did I get myself in this situation? Then it started to click in my head. I'm like, this is problematic because not because of there's like being multiple black dudes here, but because this white person invited a bunch of black tops to his house to fuck him.
Yeah. Without telling them that was the situation, though?
No, he did not mention that.
You didn't tell anybody?
No. And so I hooked up with the white guy a little bit, but then I realized that the other guys were reversed. I was like, oh, thank God. So I started hooking up with the other black guys. I avoided the one that was not cute to me. He also smelled a little bit weird.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was, he went to the gym and he just didn't shower or something, and he had been sitting. And normally, I mean, I don't mind somebody like, that like that, but it
couldn't do it.
The issue was that it smelled like he had gone to the gym, didn't shower, and sat in that all day. Sweat. Yeah. Like it had like marinated or some shit.
Can't do that. But it's when it starts getting to the funky point, it's like right after the gym.
Yeah.
Probably fine.
Yeah.
You were sitting there for an hour? No. Take a shower. Take a shower, bro.
So I hook up with the other guys, situation fetishes, and I leave, and me and one of the guys are leaving at the same time. This is pre-Uber. There is no Uber or Lyft, so I have to walk outside. Me and the guy are walking down the street, one of the first guys, and he's like, was that weird for you? And I was like, in what way? And he was like, just walking into a room as a black person to like go fuck this white dude. And I was like, yeah, he didn't tell me that he was just inviting a bunch of black dudes over to fuck him. And he's like, yeah, he didn't tell me that either. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm not coming back over here. I fucked with him a couple times, but that's just too weird for me. It just made me feel weird about myself. It had nothing to do with the fact that there were other black dudes there. It had to do with the fact that you used all of us as tools to make yourself feel good. And I did not like that. That was the very first time that I had that feeling. And I was just like, I am never letting this shit happen to me again.
Okay, here's the thing. I agree with that in the sense that was fucked up, and I totally agree with being like, I'm not gonna vote this person. The situation in general, like the idea of a white guy inviting a bunch of black guys over to fuck him in a very kind of horny scenario. Yeah, I'm good, right? Like, no, thank you. Like, that's not my vibe. I'm on the same page as you. I think if everyone was informed and agreed, even if what they're into, I think socially, societally is problematic in my eyes, if they're all into it, I'm not judging, right? There are some people who are really into those really fucked up stereotypes. And, if they're into those fucked up stereotypes and they're just spending that time together doing fucked up stereotype things together, who am I to judge, right? Who am I to judge? I think the problem gets into if you assume that shit, if people are assuming like that person did with you and all those other guys, where it's like, oh, it's probably fine for me to just invite a bunch of black guys over to fuck me and not tell them what the situation is, and they're just gonna show up and be the dom tops, you know what I mean? Like, that's fucked up. I agree. I think though, if everyone's in agreement of what the scenario is, what the situation is, though, I personally, like, I'm gonna silently judge it, but I'm not gonna be like, how dare you, 5 consenting adults who agreed upon this.
Yeah, and it's like, I wasn't even thinking about shaming the other black guys for being there, because I figured they might have been in the same boat, just the way that, like, you can kind of...
Yeah, that sounds sketchy.
Yeah, like the energy in the room, it just kind of felt off, and then he confirmed it when we walked outside, and I was just like, this is not what I was expecting to feel. I was like, oh, like a threesome, whatever. I'm like, okay, 3 turned into 5. When did 3 become 5?
It's gotta be a song. When 2 become 1, but instead of when 3 become 5.
It also could have caused a bunch of logistical problems because if those two guys were not versed and it was 4 tops on 1 bottom, I don't like to wait my turn.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I've had threesomes before. I've only done more than 3 once, and it was 5 of us. But I've grown up in the age of internet dating with apps. So everyone knew who was coming to the thing. Everybody saw each other's faces and what they were into, whether they were tops or bottoms. And it was a great experience.
I grew up in the dark ages, just a couple years before all the Grindr and shit hit.
It was really funny. It was a guy that I was regularly hooking up with. He was like my regular hookup. I had hooked up with this couple once, and then the guy that I regularly hook up with hit me up and was like, "Hey, do you want to hook up?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he was like, "Actually, do you mind if we turn into like a group thing?" And so it was one guy that I didn't know and the couple that I hooked up with before. And I was like, "This is great. Fantastic. Absolutely, absolutely solid." But that's also something in Sacramento I feel that happens where you know everybody, so you immediately, like, on the flip side, a regular hookup asked me if I wanted to do a threesome, and I'm like, "Let me see the person," and then he shows me the person, and it's someone I've hooked up with that's super problematic. That is a white guy who like fetishized the fuck out of me. I didn't hook up with him again after that. He like kept hitting me up on Grindr, and I was like, "No, thank you." And so I was like, "No, I think I'm good. You two can hook up. No, thank you."
Tell me more. I want to know about like you being in a situation of being fetishized. Like, what happened?
Honestly, most situations, I'll straight up walk away. I'll straight up like drop kick the person out of my dwelling. I can get off by myself. So if the vibes are not right, you gotta go. You gotta go, baby. So yeah, that guy specifically, we hooked up. The first time we hooked up, this is back when I lived on 18th and L. I used to live in 1801L. The first time we hooked up, yeah, it's fine, you know. And then we hooked up again, and like close to the end of the hookup, he started doing like
Doing what?
the racial shit.
Like what?
Like being like, "Oh yeah, nigga, ride that dick."
No.
Yeah. And I'm like, "You're white. You can't say that." Like, that's not okay.
Justin, that would have killed the whole situation for me.
Oh no, it did. I was like feeling it too. And then he did that, and I was like, I literally got up mid-stroke and I was like, "You have to leave. You have to get out of here." I was bottoming. I was like, "You have to leave. I'm so sorry, you have to leave." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "You have to go." He's like, "No." I'm like, "No, you have to get your clothes on. You gotta go."
Just jump right off the dick and get out.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't blame you.
I'm a self-sufficient woman.
I don't blame you for doing. I don't blame you for doing that. I can't believe he even would say that.
Yeah,
that it was hot.
Well, so part of it too, I feel like I don't have. Has anyone done that to you in the middle of a hookup? Like, has anybody,
a non-Black person, call me the N-word? Because I am a person of a certain body size and a certain RBF.
I was about to say, I feel as though, because this is not the first time that this happened to me. I have a theory that part of the fact that I'm biracial and people assume that people ascribe violent behavior to darker skinned Black men. And then I feel as though because I'm a lighter skinned Black man, because I'm biracial, people assume that I'm not going to say anything, do anything if they kind of jump over the line a little bit.
Okay.
And I feel as though a theory of mine is that's probably why I've experienced this multiple times in my sexual history, and also why I'm not surprised that you have not. Because I feel like, yeah, if someone said some fucked up shit to you in the middle of a hookup, they probably would assume, "Oh, he's going to beat my ass." So, yeah.
Yeah, but ass naked. I'm not putting no clothes on. I'm not doing, no. If you want to go there, we can go there, and I will scrap with you butt ass naked. I am not playing with you.
Well, when I went to school on the East Coast at my super white school, I almost I'm 5'10". I was at a house party with my typical group of friends at one of their houses, and it's Rochester, New York, so everything you do there is related to the fucked up weather somehow. So we made an igloo outside and we were chilling in it.
Wow.
This guy who was like 6'4", really tall white guy, played basketball for the school. He said nigga in the igloo, and my friend Ian was there, and I was like, she looked at me like, oh, and I was like,
Wait, why did he do that?
because he just uses it in his vernacular, like
Okay.
not like purposeful, just like he's like, oh, I'm used to saying this.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, I'm gonna just let you know, I don't know where you're from, I don't know what you do. Do not say that in front of me again.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? Why? And I was like, because I will beat your ass. And he kind of like smirked a little bit. And I was like, no. I know you're 6'4". We're in an igloo right now. I will beat your ass. You are a skinny 6'4" man. I have heft. I will destroy you. And he was just like, okay, I'm going to leave the igloo now. And I was like, yeah, you're going to leave the igloo now. But I feel as though people, I would say that's something that I've experienced a lot of fetishizing, and having those things ascribed to me in sexual situations. I have a theory that people feel like it's okay to say or do shit like that around me because they assume I'm not going to pop off because I'm biracial. Because they assume, oh, he's a light-skinned dude, he's not going to say anything, do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I feel like 2 points that I want to make. So the first thing is, like, I personally don't use that word often. However, occasionally I do. And I think that the issue that I've seen is because people get too comfortable around me, where they think that, oh, like maybe I can say it too. Like people even just like with music, and it's weird. And I don't have a problem with you saying it because I know you and I feel like you are a Black man to me. And I feel like there's other people who will not see, and that's a whole nother conversation about biracial people and people who identify as Black but are not seen as Black enough.
You should do an episode on colorism.
Oh no, for sure. No, it's there.
That'll be a fucking shit show, but yeah.
No, for real. It's like colorism in the Black community, and also like that again, that's a whole nother conversation. But I wanted to hit on that because I feel like somebody's gonna listen to this and be like, well, why? First of all, you're a Black man, first and foremost. So I don't have an issue with you saying it. The other thing is about the fetishization in our or for Black men in the queer community, which is like big dicks, aggressive, tall, strong, dominant. Unfortunately, I check a lot of those boxes. It doesn't really help me very much because I fit into some of those predetermined stereotypes. Like I'm tall. People have run into me and
fallen down, and people have broken their ankles to go to the hospital.
That did not happen, but there was a nose situation.
The person who's at fault in that whole situation was not you or the person who slid into you. It was the person who was standing in the middle of the running line that was a fucking idiot. Doesn't play for the league anymore because of other reasons. So,
but yeah, I feel like I fit into a lot of the stereotypes, so I get put into that bucket anytime I meet a dude. If there's somebody looking for a top of whatever, I get thrown in that bucket. That's what I'm seen as. I don't get to be anything else. And if I am anything else, then I get seen as unattractive.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
I mean, it's objectification in that sense of treating Black people as a commodity, right? Or treating anybody as a commodity. It's like you serve a use or a purpose, which if people are into that, that's great. But in general, there is a level of intimacy in sex, right? And dating, of course, and all of that. And whether that's a minimal level, because it's just like, you're like, yeah, I just want someone to come over and ram me, no questions. I face down, ass up, go at it, get out of there. But it's still like, even in that situation, right? It's still someone's penetrating someone else. Someone is in another person's home or dwelling or a place that they're staying at during that time. There's a level of intimacy, whether you're trying to be the least intimate or not. And to be treated as a tool, as an object, is hurtful. The dehumanization is rough, unless it's an agreed upon thing. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there are people comfortable with race play, which I'm not, but
No, I'm not either.
I guess that guy that said that to you, he probably would be.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
Because that's the kind of shit people say in race play.
Yeah.
It's like, whether.
Oh, no, I've gotten DMs like that.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it.
And I've hooked up with somebody who has asked me if I was into that.
In race play?
Before doing it, right? You might be somebody who's into that, and I might be like, that's kind of icky to me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're being respectful in the sense of like, I'm going to ask if you're into it first before I just drop a fucking N-bomb in the middle of, you know, and I have hooked up with somebody who asked me like, are you into race play? And I'm like, no, not at all. That is a super big turn off. And they're like, okay, I won't do that. Do you still want to hook up? And I'm like, okay. And it was great situation. Did not feel objectified, did not feel fetishized or anything. Like, it wasn't a fucked up thing. There is any type of racism, right? Because that's what we think about talking about when we say people like, this is my racial preference.
Yeah.
Any level of racism, there's the people who are like overtly racist. There are people who are subconsciously racist, and the people who think they're being the ally but are just super ignorant, right? If you examine yourself and like, oh, I have this type, this preference, right? But that can't be what is the definer of whether or not I see someone as a person or see someone as capable of being in a relationship with them or having sex with them or being their friend, then you're good. You're golden. Like, personally, I could say that I don't have a racial preference, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been attracted to a lot of different men of very different race ethnicities, very different body types, very different blah, 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 right?
I'm aware.
She a hoe. She a hoe. She a hoe from Sacramento. She a Sacramento hoe. But I major in applied mathematics. I work in data analytics. If we're looking just at the data, if I was someone who was examining my dating history or the history of the people that I've had sex with, it's been predominantly Hispanic, Latino men, and darker skinned Asian men. Like, just looking at the data, you could be like, Joe has a preference, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when people are trying to be self-reflective and they're trying to be like, oh, I do have a preference, I think when they try to articulate that, they don't have the skills and just come off as fucking racist. It's like, oh shit, I think I've predominantly had sex with or dated this group, and I'm aware of that. I think it's okay to be aware of that and be like, that's something I've done. I think you start to kind of mudslide pitfall into, you know, kind of racist territory. Again, back to that thing we talked about of like playing into the narrative, right? I think you start to slip into that fucked up place where you then start to say, oh, well, it's okay because I've predominantly dated or had sex with black men. Or, oh, it's okay, I'm going to, you know, to even it out, I'm going to start dating or having sex with black, you know what I mean? It's
even
like,
it out.
Right. It's when people start to say like shit like that, where it's like they start to compare their experience or compare, like they go from being self-reflective and thinking, okay, I need to be aware of this thing about myself and internally think about what that means for me and how I feel about it. Instead, they start to then compare it to the narrative, the stereotypes, this is how I should be and should feel and blah, blah, blah. And they start to say and do racist fucking shit.
Yeah. So for me, there's a couple things. I think that a preference should not be a requirement, and people confuse the two.
Yes, I agree with that.
They think they have a preference, but in reality, they have a requirement because they're only attracted to a very specific person. And that person could be of a specific race, a specific body type, height, meaning shorter or taller than them, a specific type of weight, etc. It could be a whole bunch of things, but those requirements to me are fucking ridiculous. And then you go
I agree.
complain about like being single or not having anybody to hook up with or whatever the case may be. The other thing is proximity.
Yeah.
That can be a thing where you work with what you have because you are only within a certain distance of a certain type of people. And that proximity for me has changed throughout my life. So when I grew up in the Bay, I mostly was hooking up with Black dudes and Latinos, throw in a couple Filipinos here and there. But that happened.
When you said that, I don't know why.
What?
It sounded like you were making a dish for a second there. You were like a chef. You were like a chef talk show host, like, and then you throw in a couple Filipinos.
I mean, that's basically what it was. That's what it was. No, because like there's a big Filipino population in Daly City, and I used to go out to the city a lot, and I used to fuck with this Filipino guy out there.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I don't know, long story. But when I moved and I went to the military, there wasn't a bunch of Black dudes around. It was mostly white dudes and Latino guys. So then I started hooking up with white dudes and Latino guys, you know, and then I moved to San Francisco. There ain't that many Black gay dudes out there. So, you know, and the ones that I did meet, we became really good friends, and we've never had sex with each other. Now I'm in Sacramento, and I've hooked up with a couple Black guys out here, but it's kind of the same thing. I don't know if it's a California thing now or
we were talking about this, but well, it's very, very much a California thing, in general, like statewide. But
yeah,
we were talking about this before when we were talking about this topic a little bit about just spaces, right?
Yeah.
Meeting other Black gay men.
Yes.
I was telling you, I've hooked up with maybe 2 or 3 Black gay men in Sacramento, and
I made the cut.
Jojo made the cut. Jojo made the cut. You heard it here first. Jojo made the cut. But no, I mean, but we were saying this city doesn't have, and it's not particularly this city's fault. This is common throughout the U.S. There's not there's not a lot of Black gay men that are like present, represented in the nightlife. Intersectional spaces like that aren't really prevalent in Sacramento. I mean, they're not really prevalent in most places. You really don't get a dedicated intersectional space between gay and blank in any other place except the bigger cities that have a minimum of like 30 gay bars, so they could have one that is a little more focused on gay and POC. But in spaces like this, our city has a pretty high gay population for its size, but it doesn't have a big enough gay population to have those really dedicated intersectional spaces. You work with what you've got. Like you work with who's actually present and interested and available.
And I mean, that's also the benefit of not having a preference. If I don't have a bunch of restrictions on who I can and can't sleep with, one thing I do want to add to that, the episode before we talked about gay bars, and Cliff came on and was talking about Sacramento specifically and about how they don't create space for Black queer people. You know, like they don't play our music and things like that. I think that if they did, the people would come out, but because they don't, we're so spread out, we don't have a communal space to actually connect with each other. I think
absolutely.
Yeah, it would help if they did that. And it kind of sucks.
I mean, look at Hush Night. Formerly Lush, now Hush. They might have changed the name again, but the lesbian queer night, it's popping in there every time because it's a dedicated night for this intersectional group.
Right.
Look at, they still do Latin nights on Wednesdays, right?
Upstairs. Oh, no, that's
Downstairs,
the Dude, they still do that Saturday one upstairs?
I think it's Sundays.
Sundays? Okay.
Yeah, they still do that one. Yeah, I heard that one's popping. But like the Wednesday one, I was there the other night and I left early, but it was already getting crowded. It was like 10, 15 on a Wednesday. If those spaces are more prevalent, absolutely. The theme drag nights, when I think for not necessarily themed, but Sia Envy, did for her birthday, she did a drag night where all the performers were Black and ton of Black people in the bar, like ton of
Yeah.
Black people coming out to listen to the music choices that they made and I think Cliff was DJing that night too.
Okay.
So like, I agree. There's also, I think the spaces aren't really there. And I think that the lack of representation, it's kind of like a feedback loop, right? The lack of representation definitely feeds into the racial preference narrative of like, well, that's, who's around and who I interact with. And so, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about why that is, because I feel like if people were around more Black people, again, I think it's proximity, right? I don't have prejudged ideas about gay white people or Latinos or Asians. I work with what you show me. So if you show me that you're a little racist, then I'm gonna treat you like a little racist.
You little racist, aren't you?
Yeah. And if you act ignorant around me about racial things, then I'm going to treat you like you're ignorant about racial things, regardless of who you are. Now, we talked about the local spaces. So they're not playing the music, people not showing up because they're not playing the music. If they were to create that space, then people would show up to those spaces and it would connect. And it'll probably break a lot of those stereotypes because, again, with that proximity, if you're around people who don't look like you, you can reframe your opinion by seeing how people interact versus having prejudged ideas of how these people are going to act. There's something that you saw on TV, and that brings me to, I want to talk about the media and advertising.
The media
and internalized bias, because
the media.
You and I did an episode on the gay cruise, and you and I went on that cruise together that one year.
Yeah, that's
and it was fun. But bitch, we don't look like any of them people in that picture.
Oh hell no, no, we do not. I mean, even in our group, to be honest, even in our friend group, it was just like, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I know why y'all like the cruise.
Well, they show this idea of it's basically a lot of white passing people.
Yeah.
And a lot of like ripped bodies that are not just built like something that you saw out of a magazine or some shit, right? And I think what it does is shapes this idea of what's considered attractive. And that's been going on for years. It's not just like a today thing. It's going on since I can even remember porn.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of people's ideas of what they see as attractive have been influenced by media and marketing and things like that to inform those racial preferences of like, okay, this is not shown in this media outlet, so this is not attractive. What you see in this is attractive. And people feed into that, whether they realize it or not. The porn you're consuming, the videos you watch, the influencers on Instagram, all that shit is being fed to you and mass produced in a way that if you're overly melanated, you're boxed out. You're not seen as attractive.
Oh, absolutely.
And then on the flip side of that, people who are not into those mainstream things tend to have a habit of over-sexualizing more melanated people, and so I consider myself a melanated person until the summer hits.
Medium. Well, because you were saying media, so I heard media melanated.
No.
Like, what the fuck?
No.
I've been melanated by the media. Be 2 shades darker.
So no, I just changed color a lot. But like, in the summer, my skin will be darker. It's funny because when I'm going through seasonal depression and I'm all yellow and shit, that's considered hot. It's
like the summer, people think that I get a lot of people who think I'm Latino. And the way that they treat me and people who don't know me hit me up, like it is different. Summer because they think I'm a different race.
Yeah, it's like if your skin tends to adjust throughout the seasons, people kind of flip on that. And it's not like a white person getting a tan. Like, we have a lot more range in what our skin can do.
Yeah, I agree. The media's kind of fucked. It's so difficult to deal with. Same with racists. It's so hard to deal with people who are racist that don't think they're racist. Like the people who Because a lot of the racism, a lot of the people who are like, this is my racial preference, the ones that are doing the most damage are doing the same or sometimes worse damage than the people who are very overtly racist, overtly being like, yeah, I'm only going to date white dudes. There's no problem with that, right? I think that the ones who are like, I'm an ally, and then feed into the narrative, I think there's a lot of those, specifically in Sacramento. We got a lot of people who are like, I have a black friend, and it's
A black friend.
I have my designated token black friend. You can't call me racist. But no, I was gonna say,
Say their names.
Say their names. There is a specific, going back to your thing of like, treat people, don't assume anything and take people how they present themselves.
Yeah.
There's a very specific group of people who are kind of defined by their job, and their job inherently has a lot of socializing and networking. And so when they go into a social situation like a bar, they don't know how to turn it off. Totally understand that, totally get that, you know, if your job is a very social one. But these people, of course, as we know, like to talk about essentially work and who their boss is and how much clout their boss has.
Yeah.
And they also like to talk a lot about what causes they support and what rally they just went to. And I would say the majority of my experiences with people having racial preferences, quote unquote, have been with people who are part of that group.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I know who of you speak.
Oh, you don't know who I speak of?
No, I do know of who you speak.
do know who I speak of. I feel like if I say their names, it'll be too
on the nose.
Well, here's the thing. We're discussing a group of people and attributes about them. And if they feel offended when I'm not saying a specific person's name, then maybe that's because they feel my description describes them. In which case, I don't feel bad about it.
Okay.
Capital case.
Oh.
I've experienced so much of like, this is my preference from that group specifically. And it's always the same people who say they're going to march because of George Floyd, but then don't actually start boycotting businesses until after Trump has raided the pauper factories because that's what they actually care about.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, they like don't become politically activated until it's actually something they care about. I feel as though it's that commodity bullshit. It's like, oh, it's fine that I have this racial preference, which what they really mean is requirement because, you know, X, Y, or Z. Because if a preference is really a preference, right? Then it wouldn't be the end all be all. I prefer on a Caesar salad to have chicken. But if I don't have chicken on the Caesar, if I have shrimp, that's fine. I'm still going to eat it. You know, I'm not going to freak out. But I think I agree with what you said earlier about it's confusing a requirement for a preference.
Yes.
And I think it's using the word preference to mask the fact that you're racist as fuck.
Yeah. I have a question kind of related to that for you personally. So, I mean, we talked about like seasons changing, like, you know, you get a little bit darker during a certain type of the year.
Yeah.
So in people mistaking you for Latino and then seeing otherwise, like later realizing that you're Black, has attraction shifted based on them not knowing that you are biracial and identify as a Black person, and then them realizing, oh shit, he's Black, and then retracting that attraction for you based on realizing that you were Black after the fact?
I've had both. I've had people realize that I'm Black and retract, and I've had people realize that I'm Black and increase. And specifically because they're like, oh, Dom Top Daddy Joseph is here. Because they're like, oh, he's Black. He's going to fit the stereotype that I have about Black people. Yeah. I've experienced both, I would say. In general, I've experienced people having a shift in how they interact with me in a relationship way or a sexual way or intimacy way based on having more accurate knowledge of what my racial breakdown is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've definitely experienced that before.
Yeah, that I feel like that just kind of gives you the information that you need to know.
Yeah.
Whether it's a preference or a requirement.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, this is
both ways.
Fucked if it truly is, oh, I'm just going to date people of this specific race or ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
That's racist. That's where it gets into that place. I think too, not just like dating and stuff, but in general, like I've seen racial preferences probably more prevalent in friendships. And I think a lot of it too,
like, hold on, back that up. And who people want to be friends with? Or, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that in general, it's easier to become friends with people you have more in common with, right? Typically,
yeah,
kind of the expectation. And there can be a little bit of an assumption that maybe people who have similar racial or ethnic background have possibly more similar experiences with the world and maybe have a similar world's view and outlook. But I've definitely seen that more prevalent, specifically with white gays, specifically in Sacramento. I've seen that predominantly. Just like I've been in conversations with, our friend group is super diverse. We've been in conversations where we're talking about race, ethnicity, and some friend of somebody in the group is there as well, like, you know,
like a extended friend.
Yeah. And just fully like bug-eyed confused, like doesn't know where to jump in, doesn't know how to interact, is not able to stay engaged because their experience with POC, for example, a white person's experience with POC, because they've been in their bubble for so long, friendship-wise, with other white people, they fully do not know how to like engage in the conversation. Like they fully do not know how to talk about it. And I think a lot of what I've seen is a lot of folks, rather than trying to figure that out, they just don't. They kind of just like, I'm just gonna stay over here. I don't know if you've heard stuff like this before, but I've been told, and I've heard from other people in our friend group, that people have come up and been like, your friend group is really, really different. And you all have some things in common. You have some things that aren't. You're all very different in the way that you, like, your hobbies and your interests and the way that you look and like your jobs. And it's like, how do you guys vibe and get along? And I feel like our kind of thread of commonality transcends that like racial discrepancy. I think is why, you know, we get along but like we are very racially, we're all very, very different. I've seen friend groups specifically in Sacramento, a lot of them are very specific, staying within a certain racial group, because it's like a preference of trying to spend time with people who are like-minded, have similar experiences and thoughts and feelings about the world that you're going to get along with. But then it's turned into a requirement where if you're not my race or similar enough, then we're probably not going to get along. I've seen that a lot in friend groups. And I'm not talking about fair weather friends. I'm talking about associates, right? I'm not talking about the people you say hi to and then don't really talk to, but the people that are going to call you on your shit and hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Who you're going to talk to on a fairly regular basis. I've seen those really tight-knit groups. I've seen very few that cross racial preference lines in Sacramento specifically. And I don't know, again, I don't know if it's like you said, proximity. Like, I don't know if it's just there happens to be a higher concentration of certain racial and ethnic groups within Sacramento, and that's how it naturally forms in friend groups, or if it is like a racial preference thing where I prefer to spend time with people who are going to get me, and it's more likely that this person who looks like me is going to get me.
I think it's effort.
Yeah.
I think it requires less effort to be interested in becoming friends with somebody who looks like you, because if you grow up and you watch TV and none of these people look like me, then you go and emulate whatever you see in the media as a child. But then when you become an adult, you realize the world doesn't necessarily look like that. It is mixed up with all these different kinds of people. I'm a big supporter of having a group of friends that is diverse, whether that's ages, body types, ethnicity, skin colors, all of that. I think that your world definitely expands based on that. But I do have a big part of my heart that really needs to have Black queer friends around me, because it definitely helped pull me out of a dark space at a time where I didn't feel like I had anybody else.
Yeah.
And like making those friends was definitely helpful for me. But I do think back to the friends that I had before that, and I don't even know if I can call them necessarily even friends, because when things got uncomfortable, when it came down to like making jokes about racial preferences, like this one dude was a white guy, he basically had a thing for Asians, but he basically said that he didn't fuck with dirty Asians. He was talking about, and I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, and like me, I was probably like, I don't know, 24, 25 at the time. And he's just like, oh, you know, Cambodians, Filipinos. He just started listing off the type of Asian people that he doesn't fuck with. But the sad thing is that even though he said that around a bunch of Asian people, they still drooled over him. It's like, no matter what this man said, he could do no wrong. You know? And so like, that's the kind of shit, even though he didn't say nothing about Black people, he did say something about darker skin, you know, and calling people dirty. And I'm just like, I can't fuck with you like that, because even though you didn't say something about me or Black people directly, I don't fuck with people who say shit like that, you know? And like, my Black friends don't talk, we don't talk like that. So like, we don't talk like that. Yeah. So I don't know. I find it very strange. Also, in addition to that, I cannot be friends with someone who has racial preferences against, or a racial preference or requirement against Black people. I just can't.
Oh, yeah. No,
I can't get into it, because I feel like if you are really my friend, and well, let's just say you say you're my friend, and you don't find Black people attractive, you generalize Black people a certain type of way, you're basically giving someone else permission to treat me badly based on the prejudice that you have assigned to Black people, and I am a Black person. So how can you want and hope for the best for me as a Black person when you have these negative stereotypes that have influenced your perception of what a Black person is when it comes to desirability, attraction, and behavior?
Yeah.
I don't believe in it.
Yeah. I agree with that. I can't stand people who do that. It's like somebody can say that and then turn around and be like, "Oh, I'm your friend, JoJo," but you can't trust that person. You can't take it sincerely, because it's like, okay, but it's honestly same vibes as like same vibes as like MAGA gays. You know what I mean? I care about you. I care about the gay community. Also, I feel like I'm going to support this group that doesn't want us to have rights. You can't say a thing and then assume that people aren't going to judge you on what you're actually putting your heft into. You're talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk. You're not going to actually give a shit about JoJo. This person's not going to actually give a shit about you when push comes to shove, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think the word preference, it's so fucked that the word preference is used here, because now it's kind of become this thing where someone says, "Oh, my racial preference is this," and everyone's like, "Monster," you know? Because I think, like you said earlier, that word really is requirement. What they're saying is requirement.
Yeah. No, it literally, okay. Remember the reason Joseph, it was literally built out of like no fats, no femmes, no this, no that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a preference.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it came from.
Yeah. And it's not a preference, though. It's a requirement. You just said no this, no that.
Yeah. I see more of people's preferences when they're single versus like when they're not single, because then they're, you know, like bitches be on the hunt. Like they be out here in these streets and you see who they're talking to. When people are booed up, it's a little bit different because they're with a person. I've been clocked like that by other Black people. For example, I was dating this Latino guy who was white passing, first generation, spoke fluent Spanish. There was a group of Black people at a bar. This girl was trying to get me to talk to her friend. I was like, no. Got dude here. That's not going to happen. I'm out with the dude, not trying to be disrespectful or anything like that. Plus, I was trying to get at him. Like, I don't want no problems. Then they basically told me you only like white dudes. And I was like, first of all, he's not
That's
white.
different.
Secondly, I feel like if, as a Black person, when I'm not fucking with another Black dude, I get judged for things like that. Like where it's like, okay, it's odd.
See, I don't get that at all.
I get it.
I think that's another difference between someone who is lighter biracial and someone who isn't. Because I don't get that shit at all. I've never once had someone be like, you know, dating a Black guy, what's wrong with you? I've never had that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because of people's perceptions of looking at you and assuming what you are versus knowing. Like he identifies as a Black person. He's half Black. He's, biracial. And then like looking at you, not knowing that and thinking, oh, this person is just with this other person. They don't see it that way. When they look at me, it's like, oh, look at that big Black motherfucker talking to that little whoever that's not Black.
I was 2.5 years into our friendship. We were all walking by the Merc or something, and somebody made a Black joke to me.
A Black person or a non-Black person?
A white person, but it was an internal joke. We were all part of the joke. Okay. But someone else in our group who is Mexican was like, "Wait, Joe, you're Black?"
Wait, did they really not know that? They didn't know.
To be friends.
Jeez.
And we all stopped and were like, "What, bro?" And he's like, "Are you guys joking? Are you guys fucking with me?" And it's like, "No, Joe's been Black this entire time." And he's like, "Really?" The assumptions definitely happen. I think specifically around being biracial, just because typically if you're biracial, the mix skin tone wise, a lot of the identification, a lot of the recognition that somebody is a certain race ethnicity is from sight, right? Mm-hmm. Like someone looks at you and goes, "Oh, that guy's Black."
Well, it's based on the stereotype of what somebody is. Like, yeah, like if you look at, I don't know, let's just say somebody from the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, whatever, they can be identified as a Black person, but they can also be Latino. What is your perception of a Black person in your mind? Is that what you're seeing? You see a Black person versus seeing somebody that's Latino and darker skin.
Yeah. From my experience, listening to what you've experienced and comparing them, I think when people don't know what my racial breakout is, they are less likely to fetishize me, exotize me, because they can't tell. Because I'm like, I'm just racially ambiguous enough to where, because people have thought I'm Mexican, people have thought I'm Indian, people have thought I'm racially ambiguous enough to where people are like, they can't say something that's gonna get them knocked up to the head because they don't know what racist fucking thing to say. But then when they do know what my racial breakout is, they feel more comfortable saying a fucked up thing, specifically because they assume that I'm not gonna pop off if they do, because they're like, "Oh, well, he's half white, and so he probably won't say something back when I say this fucked up racial thing."
Have you had friends that have said fucked up racial shit and thought that shit was funny? I've had friends who have said fucked up racial shit accidentally, and I've corrected them. Hold on.
They've said, "Oh shit, my bad."
What is accidentally?
So not like not overtly like the things we've been talking about. So for example, every Monday, a couple of us do TV night. We go hang out at a friend's place and watch TV together. These are all my really, really close friends. One of them said, we were talking about, I want to say the context was we were talking about Childish Gambino's third album, which is like the funk album that he did. one of the songs is called Redbone. And so we were talking about it and I was explaining, oh, well, this is what this is meaning. It's talking about someone who's biracial that has either a lighter inflection or darker inflection. And so like I would be like Yellowbone, for example. And my friend was like, oh, okay, so I should prefer to use like Yellowbone and say that. And I was like, nope, no, that's not a word for you to use. Yeah. So like it's never like that overt shit. It's never like super overt stuff. But
it's like lack of education.
Yeah. Yeah. And people step in it all the time. And you just say, hey, you stepped in it and here's how and here's why. And if they actually give a shit about you, they don't do it again. That happened 2 years ago. And if he hasn't said anything like that since, I think people who have overtly said shit like that, if I'm not just meeting the person, I will correct them and explain why it's not okay. There's only one person that has said like a fucked up thing. I've corrected them and said why. And they've been like, oh, okay, never again. I won't do it. And I've stayed friends with that person. Even if someone says something like, you gotta know that's wrong, I assume I give them the benefit of the doubt. If I'm friends with them and I've spent time with them enough to get to know their character, I give them the benefit of the doubt. But that's with the caveat of knowing that my, like, the first hurdle of spending time with me is super high. You know that. I hate new people. I do not like them. New people are trash. I assume the worst of, I'm a misanthropist. Is it? No. Is that right? What's the word? Hold up. I'm going to look it up really quick.
Yeah, look it up because I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. A misanthrope. Someone who hates or distrusts humankind.
Okay.
Often characterized by dislike, avoidance, or contempt for others. I assume the worst of people. I assume the worst of people from the jump. And I feel like it's a fault of mine and a friend.
We didn't have that.
Well, you were vouched for.
By who?
Jamal.
Oh. Wow.
You were vouched for and you were chill. But like, I assume the worst of people. I really do. I'm very fortunate to have the friend group that I have because it honestly, all the math, all the logic, all the variables would say otherwise, because I truly do not like people the first time I meet them. So if somebody's gone past that hurdle, right? The first hurdle of just meeting me and me being like, yes, I enjoy your company and I want to continue spending time with you, then I give them the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't accept the criticism or understand and be like, okay, my bad, I need to be aware of that, then we can't be friends. That's just a lack of empathy, right? Like if they can't understand that there's certain phrases and things that you just can't say as somebody who is not that race or ethnicity.
Yeah.
And when somebody of that race or ethnicity gives you a heads up, like, hey, this was fucked up and here's why, please correct that. And you return with either anger that they corrected you or being like, no, I'm right, you're wrong, or whatever. We're old. We're adults. Ain't nobody got time for that. I'm good. Like, fuck that shit.
Yeah. I mean, there is accountability that needs to happen within friend groups. Like, I mean, we're talking about racial preferences, things like that, and racial jokes. But I think also just generally as a friendship, like, I feel like I hold people accountable all the time. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends anymore, but there is a line somewhere where if you cross that shit, I'm done. I'm not playing this game with you where you think this shit is funny or whatever, and you're being offensive with me. And I've been very pointed with people in the past, like, where you fucking with me and you saying shit that I don't like, whether it's racially based, whether it's skin color based, whether it's hair texture based. Like, bitch, don't. I feel like you've seen people touch my hair.
Oh, people almost lose their hand is what I've seen.
I can't stand that shit.
Oh, hell no.
Like, I can't. So it's just like, I do something different to it or whatever, and somebody was like, oh, I really like your hair today, and start reaching, you're gonna fucking lose a finger. Like, don't do that. I don't like it. One time I was bottoming and I got my hair snatched. Yeah. And I actually did like that, but otherwise don't grab it. Otherwise don't grab it. Don't grab it.
I think friends and accountability. I think with any friendships, there's a level of trust that gets built up, and you give people not just the benefit of the doubt, but you give them a bigger breadth of space. I've had multiple times when some random third party person, I'm just gonna say, Jeremy and I are very close. We're very close friends. Jeremy and I, like that's like ride or die. Like he's a very, very close friend of mine.
Okay.
And I've had multiple times, like, and he has too, where like a third party has come up and basically been like, Jeremy said this about you, or Joe said this about you. And we both are like, okay, whatever, I'll check with him later. We give each other that breadth and the benefit of the doubt. One of common things we joke about is when white people say that when like they talk about like, well, what was your family's business? Like, you know, like people who are like generational that are really big on
Yeah.
and we joke, oh, well, they probably were property owners, property managers, instead of saying like slave owners, slave masters. We have that joke, and Jeremy's white, I'm black. We have that joke that we'll joke around sometimes where he'll be like, you know, like a property manager joke around, right? And that's fine. We have that trust. We've built that rapport. It's okay for him to make that joke because we make those jokes with each other and we've built that trust. But I've had experiences where we're joking around like that. Someone new is in the group. They'll make a joke like that and everyone stops, including Jeremy, and is like, hey, it's not okay for you to make jokes like that around Joseph. You don't know him like that. And so I think that there's a level of accountability that you do for people that are definitely newer to the group. I also think that you give people a lot more breadth and understanding when you've known them longer. When somebody in my friend group that I'm close with comes to me and says like, oh yeah, I have this racial preference, I'm not going to assume that it's a requirement, right? I'm not going to assume that they're racist because there's somebody that I've built a rapport with. However, a lot of people, especially in the dating scene, assume that you're going to give them that same benefit of the doubt when they say things like that. And I think with the quick interaction nature of dating apps or meeting someone in a bar or whatever, you can't do that, right? You have to be very aware of the words you're saying and the things you're doing in order to not victimize POC. There's so many people who actively do that shit, who say racial preference, mean racial requirement, know that they mean the racial requirement, know that other people are going to understand that they mean racial requirement, and do not give a fuck. Like, are like, yeah, I only date this type of dude in this type of way. I only have sex with this type of dude if he's doing this, because that's what those type of dudes are supposed to do. And I don't give a fuck what anybody says. That's my preference. And I think that with those friendships with people who might not be put in that box, right? Like my white friends stick up for me the moment someone says some fucked up shit. And in the same flip side, if in the past when someone's come up and hit on me and starts being like, oh yeah, my preference is black dudes, and because, you know, they are dumb, top blah, 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 blah. Before I can even answer, I've had friends step in and be like, hey, fuck off. So like, yeah, I think that it's something that has more nuance to it, but because of the world we live in, we can't even talk about it nuanced, right? In the situation, we have to just take it at face value because there are so many people who are like that, who are just like, yeah, Asian guys have to be, you know, this way, and black guys have to be this way, and yeah, which is fucked.
Yeah, I think it goes into stereotypes of racial preferences. If somebody has dated maybe, I don't know, you just met them, say you've known them for a year, you know that they've dated 2 Latino people, and and then you say they have a preference for Latinos, but in reality, you only know that they have only dated 2 Latino people. I don't assume people's preferences. I don't do that. unless I know people have a track record. And if you have like one fucking outlier, literally.
You said that thinking about someone. I saw your face. You said that, and I saw your face, and I was like, he's thinking about one specific person. Let me guess. You were like, this is who you fuck. This is who you date. And that person said, no.
At the end of the day, if you have dated 10 people and 7, 8, 9 of them are one color, that is not a preference.
You know what? I just thought of someone, and I think I'm thinking about the same person that you're thinking of.
Okay, now you're making assumptions.
I am making an assumption, but I feel like the person that was going after me was definitely going after you, and then had that whole mess where he was dating one guy, but then dropped him in the middle to start dating another guy, and then was like, oh, that guy was too much like the thing I wanted, and was a little toxic. I think I know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know who you're talking about. You know who I'm talking about. That's for fucking sure.
You trying to start some shit. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I am.
We're trying to start some shit.
On to the next one.
You are starting.
Black men in this
shit. Oh my God, Justin. You were starting so much shit. Okay, Joe, is there anything that you want to leave people with when it comes to racial preferences? And it could be just like coming from a Black perspective. It could come from a biracial perspective.
Yeah, I think maybe 2 things. One, don't vocalize it. If you notice that you date more of a specific race or ethnicity, just don't say it. Recognize that about yourself and maybe think about it. Think about if that's on purpose or if that just happens to be the situation. You did the maths and you're like, oh, 10 out of 11 people have been this race ethnicity. Have it be a self-reflection, like internal moment. Just don't say it. It's going to get into a whole can of worms. Nobody wants to talk about it. What that means. And just ask yourself the question, is it really just that I happen to find this group attractive and that's what keeps happening? Whether you know someone's race or not, don't comment on it in a sexual way. Whether it's positive or negative, into the narrative. Don't compare them to any stereotype, whether you're calling the stereotype good or bad. Just the fact that you're comparing a person to a stereotype about what they're going to provide or be sexually because of their race ethnicity is already bad. So just keep that out of the conversation. Focus on their personality or if they do something fancy with their tongue.
Yeah, I agree with you on the why. If you have a racial preference of if you're calling it that, I don't believe in them. I honestly don't. But if you're calling it, something a racial preference, I would think about why you have that preference. And if it comes down to something that's super prejudiced or stereotypical or assumed, then you might want, you need to reevaluate why you find that attractive and also how it affects the people that you're attracted to.
Yeah. Sorry, it's preach.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks for having me. It's a fun topic. Yeah.
We went off the rails a little bit, but
I'm problematic. You know this about me. This is known about me. This is a core principle of me as being problematic.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Okay. If you're still with us, thank you for listening. This was a long one, but I feel like it had to be. And honestly, we still didn't cover everything. There's so much more to say about internalized racism and people of color worshiping, Eurocentric features about colorism and about what it means to feel invisible, even within your own community. But I'm gonna be real with y'all. I can only take so much of this in one sitting because these aren't just talking points. These are lived experiences, and this is our truth. So that's what this episode is about. Our truth, mine, Joseph's, and the things that we've lived through, unpacked, and are still healing from and learning how to navigate. This isn't some academic debate. This isn't an open mic for both sides. This isn't any of that. This is what it means to be Black, queer, and human in a world that often wants us to be flattened into stereotypes and are racist altogether. I don't believe in racial preferences, not in the way people use that word to excuse their bias. I don't rank people by race or color of their skin, but I have had bias. I've caught myself making assumptions based on past experiences of hurt and trauma. And that's the thing. We all carry these things, whether it's trauma, culture, proximity, media, they all shape how we move through desire and connection. But we have to be willing to unpack the why. Why do I feel drawn to this type of person? Why do I write off that particular group of people? Why do I assume someone will act a certain way because of their skin tone or racial background? If we don't ask those questions, we're going to keep repeating the harm and the trauma. And even when we think we're being kind, everyone deserves to be humanized. Everyone deserves to be fully seen. Not just a body, not just a category, not just a kink. So whether you've been fetishized, erased, tokenized, or confused about your own patterns, you're not alone. But you should probably think about it. And maybe this needs to be a part 2 because there's so much to talk about. I'm JoJo. This is Black, Queer, Unapologetic. Until next time, stay bold, stay beautiful, and most of all, stay human. Bye.